This is the FrSky X14. This is one of their newer, more entry-level radios, allowing people to get into the FrSky system, but still carries over many of the great features that we saw on the likes of the X18. Today, what I'm going to do is walk you through this radio. I'm going to give you an overview of the features, the spec. I'm going to talk about how to do some things on this, including use it with external modules. And then at the very end, I'm going to share with you my thoughts. Now, just to be crystal clear up front, FrSky did send me this radio to take a look at for free, although they have not paid me to make this video. They've not seen this video before it's been published, and as always, my thoughts are entirely my own. Okay, so let's take a look at the radio controller first of all, and then I'll come back and start talking about the twin element of it in a little bit more detail. Now, in the kit, what we get is obviously the radio itself, as you can see it there. We will just get that out. Let me then just move all of the plastics and stuff out of the way. We also get included with the radio a very nice FrSky neck strap. Always nice to get with a radio. I think probably every radio should come with one, although most do. We have a sticker pack. Who does not like a sticker pack? Always one available there for us too. And then we have our little card, which is our support card. It gives us information about the radio, as well as a link to the manual and everything on the back. Now, alongside the X14, we also have their new TWW Mini receivers. Now, we're going to take a look at these later on. This is a small receiver, ideal for quads, small planes. Again, fully supporting the twin protocol as well. Okay, so jumping in closer and taking a look at the X14. Now, the version I've got here is the standard version. There is also an S version available as well. That comes with additional onboard storage as well as full metal CNC gimbals. This version comes with what they call their high precision Hall gimbal. They are Hall sensors. They are a mixture of metal and plastic. The main part of the gimbal down here is plastic, but you do have a metal cover around the outside. They are Hall sensors though, so they're going to be nice and precise. With regards to how the gimbals feel, they're actually really quite nice. They're also quite solid as well. They're certainly not as flexible as some other plastic gimbals that I have seen on the market. I don't really see anyone being particularly disappointed with them. Now, size-wise, this radio is in the same class as the likes of the Radio Master Boxer. It's not that full-size class, and it's not that gamepad controller, but it does have more controls and features than we found on many of the other radios in this size class, and that is because FrSky are not only catering for the drone community, but they are very much in the fixed-wing community world, and as a result of that, they have added the functions and controls that those users will want. Now, if I walk you around the switches and buttons, if we start at the top, we've got ourselves a momentary latch-in toggle on the left and a two-way toggle on the right. On the front, there are 4 3-position toggles, so each of these is 3-position, so you can set these within the software whichever way you want. We've got our 2 control potentiometers in the middle here. We've got S1 and S2. You see them rotating there all the way. We've then got our trims. So we've got 4 trim switches, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got programmable switches down the bottom here. These don't actually act as a single switch. These can be programmed to act as 2 separate switches. Again, a bit of a benefit over the likes of the Boxer. Then down the bottom, we've got our controls for our operating system. This radio is based on Ethos, which means you have all of that functionality, and all of our controls for that are down here. We've got dedicated buttons for our model, return, system and display, as well as our button in the center. We've got our rotary wheel and button over here. Looking around on the back, you can see there are 2 additional buttons on the rear. These are momentary push buttons. And then on the top corners on each side, you will find a slider, which is a potentiometer. Again, ideal for the guys in the fixed wing community who are going to want to use it for things such as flaps. On the back of the radio, you can see that there are rubber grips. That is for just giving you a bit of comfort, as well as making sure the radio is nice and solid in the hands. On the back here, you'll see a module bay in the center. This allows us to install a nano bay module if we want to, and it will mean it is compatible with the likes of Express LRS as well. And then in the bottom corner here, we've got our battery bay door, which contains our battery, which was included, and then our connector for that down there. Looking around the rest of the radio, on the top you will find a DSC port as well as our headphones jack. And then on the bottom of the radio, under this little rubber flap down here, you'll find an S port, an SD card port, as well as a USB-C port. Now, the other thing to mention on this radio is the antenna. This is fixed. It is not folding. It is not articulating. It does act as a bit of a handle, but it is a bit of a large appendage on the top that you do need to be aware of. Now, with regards to the fit, feel and quality of the radio, the plastics are nice and solid. Everything feels good there, although it certainly doesn't feel the quality of the likes of the X18S. There are a few little things that sort of let this radio down in that regard. They're not major, they're not deal breakers, but they are things that I personally noticed. It's little things like the control knobs down here, just they have a little bit of movement in them compared to what you had on that other radio. There's a little bit of a rattle in that. It's the same on the knob over here. There's a bit of a rock in it that you don't get on the other radio. And the other thing I noticed was my potentiometers are not centered. If I actually turn them, if I just put it up there, you'll see that there's a bit of a rock in them. Let me just see if I can show you there. There you go. You can see it. It's almost like the knob isn't fully centered, and it's the same on both of them. I don't know if it's meant to be that way. The radio from me hasn't been dropped. I don't expect it to have been dropped from the factory either. It is, though, just something I noticed. Again, it's nothing that's a deal breaker, but it is little things that I noticed compared to, say, the X18S. With regards to how it feels in the hand, it's very nice. It's comfortable. The radio does have quite a weighty feel to it compared to some of the other radios on there. And that's a good thing. It certainly doesn't feel majorly cheap in the hands. It's just there are little areas that don't have the quality that the other handset did. Now, as this is a FrSky radio, it is based on their Ethos software. I actually really do like their operating system. I talked about this a lot more in my X18 video, but I actually have to say I think it is a very nice user interface. It has a lot of options, a lot of functionality, and actually I think it's a better touch interface than the likes of Edge TX has as well. Everything is just a little bit more logically laid out. Now, as you can see at the bottom, this radio is fitted with a color screen. It is not a touchscreen. It is 2.95 inches with a resolution of 640 by 360, but all of the controls for that are handled on the sides over here. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time in this video going over Ethos. I spent a lot more time on that in my last video, but you do have all of the main controls and functions. So we have system, which takes us through the options like the file manager, the alerts, the date and time, the general settings, the battery information, your hardware, your sticks, your wireless functionality, for your trainer options, as well as the system info. And then under the model settings, you've got everything laid out here. What I particularly like about Ethos compared to some of the other OSs is just the logical layout of everything. So for instance, our RF system has its own menu over here, so we can go into here. This is where you would do your binding for your radio receivers, all of the radio control functions, as well as using the external module if you wanted to. You then just simply scroll around. You've got your telemetry, your logical switches. It is in many ways similar to Edge TX, but it is different. But I do feel FrSky have done a really, really nice job with Ethos, and it's definitely one of my more favorite radio operating systems. One of the nice additional features that you get with these radios is the fact that they have a built-in wireless trainer functionality. What I'm going to do next is show you how to set that up, but then just demonstrate that in use as well between the two handsets. Now, to use this functionality, it's really quite easy. We need to go into our model settings on both radios. We then need to go across to trainer. So I'm going to do that manually on this one. And then we need to set the mode. So on this radio, we're going to set it as master. And then on this radio, we're going to set it as slave. Now you can see down here that we've got the address of this radio. So what we can actually do is scroll down and search devices. Oh, let me just go into the right option. There we go. We can search devices, and then on the screen, it's going to come up with all the devices that are available. And we're looking for this number here on this radio here. So it is the second one down. I can click connect, and now they are connected via Bluetooth. Now here, when we scroll down, you can see the trainer is now showing up on the screen over here. You can see the outputs from that down here. We then also here have the option to set a switch to allow us to enable the trainer and disable that functionality. So the active condition switch. So if I have the switch in the top position, this would now be active, and then when the switch is in the other positions, it would not, and we'll demonstrate that on the outputs. Now, just to demonstrate this working, you can see here we've got the slave controlling the master. If I move the sticks on the master, it's completely ignored. The slave is what's in control at this moment in time, but I can simply flick the switch and then regain control, and the slave is locked out. So it's a really nice, quick and easy trainer function without any additional cables, and it's built into these radios as standard. Now, alongside the radio, as I said earlier, we also have their new TWW Mini receivers. Now, these are designed for quad users, although you could put these in any plane, anything you really wanted to, but they're a receiver that is definitely designed for the smaller quad market. Now, included with the receiver, you get, again, a little card that gives us the information of how to get instructions, support. They include a little piece of heat shrink tubing, which is good. There's no wiring in here, but we do then have the receiver itself with the dual 2.4 gigs antennas pre-installed. Now, this is a small receiver. It's not as tiny as the miniature Express LRS ones, but it's certainly small enough for most quads. It is designed to be used with S-Bus or S-Port. So, for instance, it has V-in down here, we have ground, you have S-Bus output or F-Bus and S-Port up here as well. There's a bind button included, and then we've got our antenna connections that are pre-installed over that side there. There's not really a great deal to show you on the receiver other than that. Now, size-wise, the receiver is 20.5 by 12 millimeters and it weighs 2.2 grams. What's quite interesting about this receiver is its input voltage range as well, because most receivers are only designed for 5 volts. However, this will work on an input voltage range of 3.5 to 10 volts. It needs to be at least 2.8 volts input, but that does give it a much wider range of use than you may find on some other receivers on the market from other brands. Okay, now giving you a look at the receiver under the microscope. Now in the middle there, you can see we've got the main chipset. It is masked, so I can't tell you what that is, but that looks to be the main SoC. Then further up the board, you can see there's a chipset, which is the AT2401C. That is a power amplifier. What's quite interesting about the board layout on this receiver is that it is two-sided. So this bottom antenna here goes into this power amplifier. If we flip the board over, there is another power amplifier here, which takes the top antenna. You can see the track for that down there. This then goes into this chipset here, which is an SX1281. Express RS users will be familiar with that one. So it looks like both the antennas go into that, and then that feeds then into the main chipset from there. Looking around, all of the passives look nice and clean and tidy. Everything's located nicely on the pads. We do have some pads down here on the receiver as well. Got some diode down there for some protection. There's another one on this side here as well. The quality of the receiver looks good. No complaints. Obviously, can't talk much about the longevity, but I haven't heard of any reports. Certainly no complaints with the build quality from what I see here. Now, one of the big benefits of this radio is the fact that it is based on the FrSky Twin system. If you don't know what Twin is, it is a dual transmission system on 2.4 gigs, but instead of transmitting both signals on the same type of protocol, you have one signal being transmitted on FSK and one signal being transmitted on LoRa. Now, just to be able to show you how this works, I've currently got the radio on my Spectrum analyzer. Behind me here, you're seeing the 2.4 gigs band. The radio is currently set to access D16 mode, so this is a non-twin mode, and then what we'll do is switch it into the twin mode in a minute to show you the difference between normal RC and then the twin mode. Now here we have each of the packets of data being transmitted on the 2.4 gigs band. If we hop onto the histogram, you can see it here a little bit easier. We're transmitting over about a 70 megahertz bandwidth, and each of these spikes is one packet of data, with the dark blue being a histogram view, the history of where the packet was, and it just shows you how the packets are being transmitted, and it gives a bit of an easier view. The best way though to look at this is on the waterfall view, because this will actually give us a true indication of how the packets are being distributed across the band in real time. So if I just pause this here, each of these little dots is a packet of data being transmitted, and here you can see the actual hot pattern of the system in the Access D16 mode as it's moving through in time. If I just change the settings on this a little bit, just to show you this a little bit easier, if we then go back to playing and then pause, you can see here the individual packets of data. So that's one there, that is one there, that is one there. Again, being transmitted across the band. Now, where this gets interesting is when we switch it into the twin mode. So again, if I just pause here, you can see we are only transmitting one packet at a time. However, if I now change the radio over from Access D16 to twin, you will now see that more packets have appeared on the screen. And if we pause it, we can now see that there are actually 2 packets of data being transmitted at each moment in time rather than one. You have the original packet of data here, and you now have this new packet of data next to it here. Now, if I zoom in on this and look at these in a bit more detail, you can see we have this long packet here and this shorter packet here. This shorter packet was the original packet that we were transmitting, and this is the FSK packet. And this long packet that you can see here is actually the LoRa packet, and you can actually see the individual chirps of data in the packet. It's longer, it's a longer duration packet, but it has less bandwidth overall, and as a result of that, it should offer more sensitivity when used in comparison to, say, FSK. And the real benefit of this overall in the end is that we're transmitting that RC control signal twice at the same time on 2 different frequencies. So not only do you have frequency redundancy, you have modulation redundancy as well, because they are on different protocols. This should mean your RC signal has a much better chance of getting through where there is localized interference. Now, the next thing I want to do is just walk you through the process of binding this receiver to the radio, because it isn't quite as simple as it is on other systems where you just press a button, tell it to bind, and it works. There's actually a 2-stage process to this, and that's what I'm going to walk you through next. The first thing we need to do is register our receiver with the radio, and then we bind it to the model. So what we need to do is go into our model settings. We need to go down to RF, and we do need to make sure that we have our internal transmission module turned on. So you can see it is on. It's in TW mode, and we want to scroll down to the option that is down here called register. You can see below this we've got bind and set as well, but the first thing we need to do is register it. So before I power the receiver on, what we need to do is set this into registration. I'm then going to press and hold the button on the receiver, and I'm going to plug in the USB cable to my flight controller to power it up. And that should now have registered the receiver to this radio. If I click register, registration is okay. That is now done. The next thing we need to do is bind the receiver to the radio. So what I'm going to do now is unplug the receiver again. And this time I'm going to go down to bind, click bind, plug it back in. You can now see that it has detected the receiver. Click OK. Bind OK, and that is the process done. The first thing to understand really with this is before you can bind, you need to register the receiver with the radio, and then you bind it to this model. Now, whilst this radio is designed to be used with the FrSky twin system, it does have an external module bay on the back, and as a result of that, you can use it with systems such as ExpressLRS. What I'm going to do next is walk you through the process of how to actually get that working, because it isn't quite as straightforward as plug and play. You do need to install a Lua script, but it isn't particularly difficult, as you will see. Now, to be able to get ExpressLRS working on this radio, you do need to download and install the ExpressLRS Lua script. Now, just to be clear, this isn't directly from the ExpressLRS devs. It's from the Ethos team who make the operating system for this radio. Now, to do this, you simply go to the GitHub, download the ExpressLRS file. So we're going to download that. Then we will need to install it with the Ethos Suite configurator. Then in Ethos Suite with the radio connected, I'm going to go down to Lua Development Tools, click Open Zip, and we're going to select the zip file that I just downloaded. We're then going to select that and then tell it to install. Now, to install the module is very straightforward. You just remove the cover off the back and then plug the module down into the bay just like you would on any other radio. Then we need to go into our model settings, and what we now need to do is disable the internal module. So at the moment we've got our normal internal module turned on, so I'm going to turn that off. and then minimize that. And then below this, there's an option there for the external module. I'm going to enable that. And the first thing we need to do is then select the Express LRS module version. If you scroll down, you should now have Express LRS listed. If you don't have Express LRS listed here, that means your Lua script hasn't been installed and you need to go back and do what I showed you a few minutes ago. Once we've selected Express LRS, if I scroll down, we have the options. We then need to enable the module. You should hear your module kick in on your radio. And if I now go down to configure, it will then show us the module that's been picked up. If I hit select, this then gives us all of the standard options that you find within the Express LRS Lua. And basically, it works now on this just as it does on any other radio. Now, this wouldn't be my channel if we didn't take it apart. So the next thing we're going to do is tear it down. Okay, so let's take a look at what the build quality is like internally on this. We always tear radios down on this channel, so it should be no different with this one here. Now, I don't exactly know how this comes apart, but we have some hex screws there. So let's just see what size I need for that. It is bigger than that one. Let's see. Here we go. We'll undo these 4 first of all, and then we'll see if we need to undo any others. There is 2 in the middle there as well, which look to be smaller. I don't know if they're just for the antenna or do they hold the chassis together as well. And then what we'll do is very carefully see if we can separate it. It did feel like something loosened up as I did that, so let's just see what happens. It's definitely loosened, but it's still tight there. So let's see. I think let's undo these 2 as well. Let's see what happens with them. This does feel like it's antenna related, but that doesn't mean the shell doesn't still hold together with it. Oh, there we go. Okay, our back shell is coming free. And we need to be very careful because there is a ribbon cable. You've always got to watch for things like this. So that ribbon cable goes, let me just grab the screws as they fall out. That ribbon cable goes to the back of the shell there. I'm going to disconnect it from this side because I think that's probably the simpler side to do it. It's one of these little flip up latches with the ribbon cable, and then that pops free. You're going to want to make sure you catch all your screws. Looking at the back of the shell. So that then has our module bay board at the back, and then we've got our 2 corner potentiometers mounted there on the back as well. They go into that board and that all gets passed over this ribbon cable. Nice and straightforward like that. Now, looking around the inside of the radio here, you can see we've got our board at the bottom. We've then got an intermediate board here and here. That has our trim switches on. We've then got a bottom board and then a top RF board with our antennas up there, our switches and everything mounted to it. Now down here, you can see that main SoC. That is the STM32H7. Again, that's going to offer a lot more power than you get in the F4 series. You can see that's mounted down there. Looking around, we've then got a Winbond flash chip. Actually, it looks like we've got 2 Winbond flash chips. We have another chipset there. I'm not sure what that is. I think we'll look at that a little bit more in a minute under the microscope so we can just have an idea of what that is. We've then got our power circuitry over this side of the board here, a backup battery, and then you can see there's a little Bluetooth module over here. This will be the communication module that allows this radio to talk to other FrSky radios for that wireless trainer functionality. We've then got our gimbals, and you can see these are held in place with screws. So there's 1, 2, 3, and there is a 4th one under the PCB up there. They come down wired into this connection here and here. Both of the gimbal wires come into the same connector that go into there, and then that little connector next to it goes into the trim switches. The board underneath is going to be for the power connections from the look of it. So the buttons that run along the front there. So that will be those control buttons there, trim switches and power button, as well as our potentiometers. And then our switches look like they go into that board as well. You can see there's no wires going into this top RF board at all apart from the antennas. So pretty much it looks like all of the I/O for the switches comes through this ribbon cable down here into that main PCB. Now, with regards to the RF board, there is one thing plugged in on the side here. I'm not sure what that is. That disappears underneath. I might try and find out what that is in a minute, but I'm not exactly sure. It's very thin wires. It almost looks like speaker cables. Perhaps it is the speaker, but we will check that out. And then we simply have our dual RF modules. You can see them here, there and there. And then we've got our two antenna connections that come out the top, and that goes into our antenna up there. So if I just look, the antenna is bolted down and in, so that can be unbolted if need be. Now, with regards to these RF modules, these cans do actually lift off. We're going to be very careful in doing so, but it does look like we can pop them off. I'm only going to pop one off, if I'm honest, because I don't really feel the need to do two, because it'll be identical underneath, I suspect. So there we go. There is the one. So there you can see we've got a chip there with what's most likely the RF power amplifier and out. I think that chip looks like it's masked. I'm not 100% sure. Again, we'll have to look at that under the microscope. Let me just have a look at this side. There, just popping this side off. And it is actually a different chipset, which is quite interesting. There's more going on this side than there is this side, but that might be due to the different protocols. I'm not exactly sure, so we'll have a closer look at that in a second. Okay, so there I've lifted the RF board up, and underneath you can see all of the switches come into this board all via these big connections. You've then got an IC here, and then that comes down through the ribbon cable. Now, I think these are the wires for the speaker. The speaker is there on the front of the radio, and that comes in down there, so it looks like that's on the main RF board. Now, just looking at some of the ICs under the microscope, the first one there is our STM32H750. You can see that there nice and clearly. That other IC that I mentioned, that is the Alliance memory chip. That's the onboard flash chip for the radio. And then you've got some flash chips down here. You've got a 4C one as well as a Giga Devices one. If we move around the rest of the board, there isn't that much to see really other than the main components for the power circuitry. You can see that over there. We've got the USB. If we go over to the Wi-Fi adapter, again, it's masked, but you can see the little Wi-Fi chip antenna there. And then we've also got some pads over there. Now, with regards to the RF modules, yeah, you can see there that the chipset is masked. What we've got at the top there will be most likely the power amplifier, and then you can see the circuit then going down to the main chip. There is another one of those ICs up there as well. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe voltage regulation. And then if we hop over to the other module, you can see that it is a different chipset, again masked, but then you can see that then going up with the passives, up to the power amplifier, and then out to the antenna. So one will be your LoRa side, and one will be your FSK side. If I was a betting man, I would say this is the LoRa side, and that is the FSK side. Overall, with regards to the build quality, I have to say this radio looks really, really good. It is exactly what you would expect from a manufacturer who's been making radios as long as FrSky have. For instance, all of the switches have heat shrink tubing on them. All of the wires where they go to moving components are glued. The quality of the wires is nice. This is not really thin. This is nice, soft silicon wire. There's plenty of length on them on the gimbals as well. They're tucked away nicely where they need to be, but there's also plenty of length for movement where it's needed as well. With regards to the quality of the PCBs, the layouts look good. In fact, there's something really interesting here I've never seen on another radio before is this. They've even put like an earth bond between these two boards. You can see that down there. And really, it's what you'd expect from a manufacturer who's been doing it this long. And I've just got nothing at all I would say they could have improved upon. I think they've done a great job. Okay, so to share with you some thoughts on the X14. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about it compared to the X18, and then we'll talk about it compared to other radios on the market. Now, there is no question This radio is not at the same quality as the X18, but don't think that makes it cheap. I'd say it's absolutely on par with the likes of the Radiomaster Boxer and others. It's a nice feeling radio in the hands. I like how thin it is actually compared to the other radios out there today. It's got a nice weighty feel to it as well, but it's not too heavy, but it does give a bit of a feel of quality in the hands. All of the buttons and controls are easy to get to. The buttons on the back are nice and easy to reach. The gimbal reach is good enough for me. I got no complaints there. The switches and buttons are in the right places. And again, it has all the controls and functionality that you're going to need for a quad, but also most people who are flying planes as well. What I also like is the fact that they're not giving up on plane users. You still have sliders. You're finding a lot of the other radios today are not installing sliders, and that is limiting them somewhat compared to what FrSky are doing here. Plane users still want things like sliders, and it's great that FrSky are installing it. About the only areas that I would complain about on this radio are the buttons down the bottom just don't quite feel the quality as they do on the X18. Just a little bit of a rattle there. Those potentiometers aren't quite centered in mine. Not sure what that's about. Others may not be the same. And then about the only other thing that I would mention is that antenna on the top. I would prefer a folding antenna compared to this one. It's just a bit of an appendage. It does make a good carrying handle, but a folding antenna is always better. What there is to like, though, about this radio is the fact that it does have that full Ethos operating system. Whilst it doesn't have the touchscreen, I am a big fan of Ethos. I really like how easy it is to use. I like how you can configure it as well, and it's good that you've got it here, although you don't have the touchscreen functionality, but you can still do everything via the buttons. As I showed earlier as well, it's good that you can use this radio with Express RS via that back port, although that functionality isn't official. It's good that you can use it, but just be warned, if there are any new features that do come with Express RS in the future that might not be compatible with this, it would mean that it wouldn't work. But for basic use, it's absolutely fine. Now, with regards to price, the X14 that you've seen here today is available in the USA for just under $180 or just under £166 in the UK. That is for the standard edition, but it does include the battery as well. There is also a S version of this radio available, which includes higher onboard storage. You now have 5112 instead of 128, and it also includes their MC18 full CNC Hall effect gimbals. Now, if you don't know what these are, I actually did a review of these in my X18 video. I talk about these compared to the standard ones, and if you're interested in seeing my review on this radio, there will be a link to that in the description. But the basics are, they are a full CNC metal gimbal, a much higher quality gimbal compared to the plastic. That isn't to say the plastic gimbal is bad, but it's just on another level compared to the standard ones. Now, that version of the radio is going to cost you about another $100. As I've said, you're getting the extra storage and those CNC gimbals, but it does mean you can get yourself a more premium option if you're looking for it. In the end, I think the X14 is a nice radio, and it's good to see a lower price point option in the FrSky range. And if you want to get yourself into the FrSky system, it is absolutely worth a look, especially if you don't want to quite spend the money that you need to spend to get yourself something like the X18 or the X20. Now, that's it from me on this one. I want to say a big thank you to FrSky for sending the radio over. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buy me a coffee. We would not keep being able to make content on this channel without your support, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of my Patreons. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.